Ken Schmitt is co-founder and partner at Ascentria Search Partners, and he has 28 years of national recruiting experience. He merged his legacy firm in May of 2025, so congratulations to your merger to create Ascentria Search Partners. And he focuses on private equity-owned, founder-led mid-market companies across industries. And he and his fellow co-founder, Sean Richardson, place mid and executive level talent in sales, marketing, operations, accounting, finance, HR, and the C-suite. Ken is also the host of Hiring Matters podcast and an author of The Practical Optimist. I love that title so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention is Ken is based in San Diego, but his firm does placements all over the country and also has a lot of international clients as well. So excited. Oh, looks like there's a ton of people here. Reno, Scottsdale, Dallas, great, Cincinnati, Chicago, Portland, Maine, where I'm at. Wonderful. Denver. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. So Ken, we're going to dive right in. What are you seeing in the market right now? We'll start with an easy one.
Exactly. Kind of this first softball question. Thank you. So first of all, thanks for inviting me to joining today, Debra. I'm excited about our conversation, and it's nice to see that we have so many people from all across the country. That's fantastic. I'm actually heading out to Arizona next week for a conference with their Private Directors Association. So get a little flavor for what's happening in the job market out there. On a national, broader scale, to your question, it's the word that we keep using right now is the word fluid. Everything is kind of in flux right now, whether you're on the job seeking side as a candidate or whether you're a company looking to hire talent. There's just a lot more uncertainty than you would have expected coming into a new administration, and given all that's been going on with growth and expectations, inflation coming down, interest rates coming down, growth doing pretty well over the last, a number of quarters. But even with that backdrop and that's kind of stable economy behind us, things are just a little bit in flux right now. And so we're seeing, that's translating into companies still hiring, but taking longer to make decisions, first of all. They're also being a little bit more selective in terms of the skill set and culture fit to make sure that it is the right fit before they make a hire. And on the candidate side, we do a lot of work with folks that are currently employed, but also those that are in a selective, job search mode in transition. And again, candidates are also being more selective. Right? They don't want to run the risk of being the last in and the first out if they change jobs or accept a position only to have that company change directions or lose their funding or lose a big customer in short order. So people are being a little bit more, particular and a little bit more discerning, I would say, before they decide to actually make a move.
Right, absolutely. And I'm sure that definitely impacts your work. As we go through here, if anyone has any specific questions for Ken, pop it in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So if you have any things, now that you've got a recruiter on the line ready to go, happy to answer any questions you might have. So tell me a little bit about the PE space that you work in with PE and private owned companies, that mid-market. What are they really looking for in that standout candidate right now? You said they're being a little more selective, making sure there's culture fit. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always talk about how it's important as a job seeker, to know your audience. And the same holds if you're a company looking to hire, right? Looking to make sure that you are aligning yourself with the right organization and or, talent pool to be sure that you're all on the same page. So in terms of what we see out there, so our marketplace, the clients that we work with are, what we call, middle and lower middle market. So that means revenues of, 15, 20 million on the low end, up to about 2 billion on the high end. It's a big range, I realize, but depending upon where you are in the country, a big company is defined differently. So in that space, there is a fair amount of hiring going on, without question. As I mentioned before, it's taking a little bit longer, but the hiring is certainly still there. And I would say that in that size company, the bigger the company, so the multi-billion-dollar companies, those positions tend to be very siloed, right? We kind of use the phrase, an inch wide and a mile deep, where you're doing, one or two things, but you're doing everything within that particular space, right? That's necessary and appropriate for a large company. You have a lot of people, thousands of employees, and you need these domain experts in different areas. When you go into more of a middle market company where they don't have quite as many resources or employees, people need to be more adaptable. And you've got
Oh,
to be able to understand and understand the other side, but also communicate effectively with other parts of the organization. A great example is, and we do a lot of work in sales and marketing at the mid and upper levels also. And when I first started recruiting, 28 years ago, those were both very siloed roles where sales, we're only in front of customers and doing one thing. They would always blame marketing for getting, lame leads and nothing ever.
right.
Right. And then marketing says, we're giving you great leads, but you guys in sales, you don't do anything with them. You don't follow up. Right. So it was very siloed and kind of, back and forth. Fast forward to today, and that linear relationship where it used to be marketing did this, and this, and then stopped and sales took over. Now it's much more circular. It's much more of a collaborative relationship. And so those middle market companies really need people that have experience working across departments and outside of their job function. Whether it's sales, marketing, operations, HR, you name it, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can communicate with other parts of the organization and that you understand the ripple effects of the decisions that you make on your team, how it's going to affect the broader business overall, revenue, cost, all those kinds of things. So that's what a lot of middle market companies, especially those that are private equity backed, are looking for these days.
Okay, that's so helpful and so interesting. I mean, that collaborative piece is definitely, we're seeing that more and more lately, right? About how you can work across silos and across organizations.
Yeah.
And so quick shameless plug for anyone who's going through your job search and you feel like maybe you're spinning your wheels or you're not necessarily aligned or you're just thinking about starting. We do have a downloadable job search diagnostic that you can use to see if you're in the right direction, where you can improve, things like that. So I'm just going to share that real quick here. This is just a quick download. It'll help you self-paced diagnostic to see where you're doing well, where you might be able to ramp up your efforts in some of these areas that Ken mentioned around being aligned to the role and getting interviews and things like that. So I'll leave this up for just another couple seconds while I tee Ken up to the next question, which is, I know you all do a lot of research around compensation, and I would love to know where you're at with that, what you're seeing in the market right now, because compensation is top of mind for every candidate.
Yeah, that's a great question. And whether it's a good market, a bad market, or just kind of a stable market, compensation is always part of the conversation without question.
Right.
And just just kind of piggyback and a plug for you as well. Having someone like you, Debra, on your side as a candidate to understand not only kind of what companies are looking for and how best to present and position yourself, but also in terms of compensation. You talk to a lot of candidates, a lot of professionals, as I do as well. Your clients are my clients and vice versa. And so for anybody out there looking for that kind of resource and sounding board, someone like Debra is a great person to kind of get that information from. On our side, sure. On our side, we do publish, twice a year, we do a pretty comprehensive compensation guide. Prior to the merger that Debra mentioned, that you mentioned before, I was doing a sales, marketing, operations, and C-suite positions. Now with this merger, we also are now doing accounting and finance at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So our compensation guide, our mid-year update, which will be in late July typically, will now for the first time include accounting and finance positions also.
Great.
So much broader from that perspective. And you can find it on our website. It's free to download. It's very easy to access. But the compensation it's been such an interesting dynamic over the last 4 years. In 2019, 2018, 2019, things were decent. We would usually see people changing jobs for 10, maybe 15% bump in salary. Nothing monumental. Things were moving along at a pretty consistent pace. Then obviously COVID hit, right? And there were a lot of layoffs, a lot of furloughs, a lot of businesses that unfortunately closed down completely. And so people were really kind of just, holding tight, hunkering down just to survive and not get, not lose their job. Then when things started to improve, we started to come out of COVID in the latter part of 2020 and of course, early 21. A lot of people looked around and said, all right, my job is stable. I didn't get laid off. I'm still here. But some of my friends or colleagues got laid off. I'm now doing the job of 2 or 3 people. And early in 2020, a lot of companies did away with 401k matches. There were no bonuses. And worse than that, a lot of companies just didn't do a good job communicating with their staff about what their game plan was, to get through COVID. And so all those things happened. And then that, drove the great resignation in 2021 and 22, and even the early part of 23. And so in that now those kind of 48 months, or I'm sorry, 24 months, if you will, 2 years, we saw a huge spike in compensation, more than I've ever seen in that, short period of time. People were getting, 20, 30, 40% bumps in salary to make a job change because there are so many, companies out there looking to now rehire after they laid people off in the uncertain COVID times. And also people had, candidates, employees hadn't gotten a raise or a bonus in so long, and they felt disconnected and really, kind of this lack of loyalty from their employer. So they were much more willing to make a change. So that was the huge spike up. So now we're back to it being kind of level. If you look at the year over year wage gains, it's on trend for what we've seen over the last 20 years. It's about 3.5% to 4%. That's across all positions. And we at the middle and upper level are seeing back to that 12, 15% bump in salary is typical if you're changing jobs right now. So it's still part of the conversation. People are also, employees are also talking a lot about what are the other pieces of the overall compensation structure, not
so
just
important.
Salary. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's more prevalent today than what it was pre-COVID. What are, vacation time? Can I take vacation? Am I going to be chastised if I do take my vacation time? We Americans are terrible at actually using our vacation time. I have a lot of international clients, and we always talk about that fact. It's very different over in Europe.
Yes.
And also I think with Gen Z coming up, right? So I have a 27-year-old and a 23-year-old, and they are much more willing and comfortable talking about things like mental health, in the workplace. What are the policies and structure around mental health? What's happening again as far as time off and PTO? It's really important to them. How much travel will they have to do if it's a sales job, for example, because they want to stay closer to home with their family? So that work-life balance, I hate that cliche, but it's important to kind of be aware of that as an employer, that the younger generation especially is really attuned into that and want to keep that conversation going.
It is something that people are asking for, and I think with Gen Z asking for it more, I'm seeing our executive clients really feel better about saying things like, I'm looking for something with 50% or less travel. They're still, open to travel, open to doing these things. They know it's going to require a lot, especially at the executive level, but putting some boundaries in for the first time has been interesting to see where people are asking for some of those things. Yeah. So there's a lot of great questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask one real quick, deviate a little bit here and show this question from Julie Porter. I relocated to Dallas a year ago, and I'm still building a network here. Any tips for lining up an executive level finance role in a PE-backed company? How would she position herself for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Julie. And this goes for really anybody out there. What I said a few minutes ago is, know your audience. So if you are focusing specifically on private equity, backed companies, you got to make sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile are, they kind of scream your background, your expertise, and your value proposition to that particular kind of organization, right?
So true.
I know, Debra, you talk with your clients about this all the time. You got to make sure that your headline in your LinkedIn profile is really, is being utilized the best possible way. As a search firm owner, as a recruiter, that is the first thing that I look at when I'm trying to find candidates out there. What does that headline look like? So as you're, building out your network also, Julie, and trying to get in front of the right people, make sure that if a private equity managing partner or head of HR or board member sees your profile and they have an opening for a head of finance, that they're going to see very quickly, oh, Julie has this experience, not only the technical side in terms of finance and whether it's SEC reporting or it's FP&A or whatever it might be, but also that you've done it in that type of a context, in that scenario where the company is owned by private equity. It's much like working for a public company in terms of the scrutiny and the focus on financials and EBITDA and making sure that you're running as lean as possible. Because as we all know, private equity, they're buying companies to then eventually sell them.
Right.
And so you've got to make sure that you're demonstrating your value proposition around that space. And I would also encourage you, you said that you're in Dallas and been there for, I think you said a year or so, finding people, kind of finding your tribe, so to speak. Who are the other folks in that Dallas area that are also VPs of finance? Who are the private equity firms or the portfolio companies in that region that you can connect with and talk to and network with? that visibility is going to be really important. I know, Debra, you and I discussed this offline, but if you look at the way where jobs come from, right? This has been true for the 28 years I've been recruiting. About 80% of positions come by way of either networking or a referral, right? That's where the majority of jobs come from. And even it gets even higher as you move higher up the ladder, right? VP of Finance is a great example of that. And the other 20% is a combination. If you're a VP level or above, you got about a 5% chance of getting a job through a job posting, and about a 15% chance, give or take 15%, through a search firm like mine. And I bring that up because the trap that a lot of job seekers fall into is they spend 80% of their time on that 20% piece, and it should be flipped around. So if you're in job search mode or networking mode, spend most of your time networking, trying to meet people and get connected, get referrals, that kind of thing. Don't ignore, job postings, but use it as a research tool. Don't put all your eggs into that basket, because you're going to be very disillusioned very quickly.
I love that point about using it as a research tool. And you're so incredibly right. I love your point about it's 80% networking, and even working with recruiters, it's still going to be, 15% or so. It's not going to be your main channel. And that's something we tell candidates all the time, but it always helps to hear someone, is sitting in the recruiter seat to talk about that. So you brought up a really good point with Julie's answer, and something you and I talked about offline yesterday is, tell me a little bit about how a candidate can stand out to you. How do you find candidates? How can they stand out as someone you'd want to interview?
Yeah, it really comes down to, like I said, LinkedIn is, as we all know, is the place to be. I spoke on a panel for the American Marketing Association here in San Diego last week. And one of my fellow panelists was an executive at LinkedIn. We were talking a lot about LinkedIn. And it is the place to be. Whether you are domestic here in the US or international, about 80% of their new members are outside the US. This is what I heard from Melissa there. And so that's powerful. If you're looking to work outside the US, LinkedIn is a great place to be. But even if you are domestic here in the US, it's also a great place to be. So standing out, it's really about differentiating. It sounds like it's a very cliche, simple term, but what is it that's truly unique about you? For example, I'll talk to candidates sometimes, and we'll be talking about their background and skill set, and they'll give me the usual kind of generic type things. And then at some point along the way, they'll mention almost under their breath that they speak another language, or that they put themselves through college, or they were the first person in their family to go to college. Right? These are all things that demonstrate work ethic. A unique value proposition, something that's different, for you versus the 15 other people that are lined up behind you looking for the same kind of a job. So don't underestimate those things that are really differentiators. And again, I know I'm a broken record here, but make sure those unique aspects of your background are front and center in your LinkedIn profile without question. I have this phrase that I use. Yeah, exactly. I have this phrase I use called your digital shelf space, which, I say that because you go into a grocery store, right, and you go into the soda aisle, for example, and there's a zillion different drinks there. But about 80% of those drinks are owned by 3 companies, right? Coke, Pepsi, and Keurig Dr. Pepper. So they have so much, kind of shelf space. Chances are pretty good they're going to make money off you no matter what you buy. Same kind of thing comes for you as a job seeker or as a company as well. You've got to have that digital shelf space so that you are visible. You are easy to find. You are found through a variety of things. Obviously, your LinkedIn profile, as I mentioned. If you comment on other people's comments, that's fantastic as well. If you host a podcast or you've been interviewed on a podcast, that's content also for you. If you write a blog, all those things are going to come up. If I do a search, just a regular search on Google for VP of Finance, Dallas private equity, if Julie, for example, has all the things I just mentioned, she's probably going to hit my radar screen 3 or 4 times. As opposed to somebody that has a very, very minimal LinkedIn profile or doesn't really do much else out there, I'm going to have a hard time finding them. So look for ways to, again, increase that digital shelf space and get that branding and visibility.
Yeah, I love that thought about digital shelf space. And I love your point about commenting on other people's comments. I see a lot of people think about LinkedIn and want to, they get bogged down in the what should I be posting, and they spend a lot of time on it, and then they kind of get bogged down and don't do anything, right? But it's really around just being visible. And every time you comment, your headshot, your name, and your headline that you talked about being prime real estate follow you everywhere you go. And that's a really great way to be seen and be visible if you don't want to post original content. So that's so incredibly helpful. I love that some people in Dallas are connecting with each other in the comments. Great job. Hi, Asif. It's
Great.
good to see you too. Glad that you joined us. So quick thought, you bring up the unique value piece. It's so incredibly important. It's something with our candidates, we take our candidates through what we call the executive edge method to really get clear on that ideal next role, build out your value, build out your standout executive resume, LinkedIn profiles, you're findable, all of these things, right? 7 steps. But that unique value is incredibly important. It's a really high value thing to do because you have to differentiate. Tim Bashirs is an executive recruiter in the tech space with Fox Search Group. We're good friends, and Tim had a blog article recently that said, "Okay, so you're a technology leader with 30 years of experience. Great, that's nice. So are the 3,000 other people, right? What are you doing to stand out, or what are you doing to be different?" And it's so incredibly important. And if you're wondering if you're standing out or where you're at with your unique value, we have a download if anyone wants to see where you're at with some of these different areas of your search. So the 7 areas that are critical for an executive search. You can kind of do a self-diagnostic to see where you're at by downloading this guide. I'll leave that up for just a second while we transition to another question here for Ken. I know something people ask all the time is, how should someone reach out to a recruiter? How should you, if you're doing some, outreach directly, what stands out? How do you want to be connected with? And then in general, how should people reach out to you specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. We could probably talk for a couple hours about just that one topic. It's a great conversation piece. I totally agree. So I guess just a really quick, kind of to level set. One of the misperceptions out there is that recruiters are here to get somebody a job, right? And it makes sense. You think, well, they're a recruiter, they're talking to people, their job is to get people jobs. But in the reality is our job is to really work with a company. We call our company our client, right? So a company to help them find people. So that's kind of what drives us first is the company, which engages us for a position. Then we go find people, as opposed to having someone that I have in my database and I'm going to shop around. There are certainly some recruiters that do that. It's not usually very effective, but some people do that at the lower levels, especially, but not at the higher levels. So from that perspective, you want to make sure that you're working with the right kind of recruiter, first of all, that is doing things the way that you want them done. That's really important.
So important.
Yeah, but once you understand that recruiters are not here to get you a job, we are here to be a conduit, a liaison, a sounding board to give you some market intel out there. Then it changes the conversation. So when you reach out to me or any of my colleagues out there, and you say, "Hey, Ken, I'm a VP of finance. I'm in Dallas." Sorry to keep using your example, Julie, but I'm in Dallas and I'm looking for something new. The key, the way that I'm going to respond and what's going to compel me to respond is you saying something like, you may not, I looked at your website already, Ken. I didn't see any open positions, but I want to get on your radar screen. And also I'm networking quite a bit myself. How can I help you? That email is going to be at the very top of my list in terms of who I'm going to respond to versus what you said before. I'm a technology VP. I've got 30 years, blah, 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 blah. I can't tell you how many times I get that kind of email. And it's just, I put it into my look at it later folder.
And it's so incredibly long, or it's tell me if you have anything that fits my background, and there's almost no information, and neither of those things are helpful.
Right, exactly. And I know we can also delve into AI, but I will also caution people to not rely solely on AI to write an email introduction or even a resume, because I'm starting to get more and more of those, and it's very obvious. The language isn't right. It's too formal. It's not personalized. We as recruiters and as employers, we want to know you as a whole person, right? And so we expect some kind of personalization and some kind of don't be use a lot of slang and have it be overly familiar, but it needs to sound more casual and more comfortable. So long answer to your question about how to connect, but reaching out, trying to find a way to engage. Again, do your homework, do your research. What also I hate is someone will say, "Hey, Ken, this is my background. Do you have any jobs for me?" And I'll think, and they may be an IT person. And if you look at my website for more than 3 seconds, you know that I don't recruit for IT professionals. It's just not my expertise. So, you as the job seeker should be doing the research before you even come to me. Don't make me do all the work for you. So that's the most effective engagement, if you will, is the informed engagement but also the engagement from people that are willing to provide some support and help and make it a two-way street.
I love that. That's so incredibly important and such great advice. And I love how you built in the, you are seeing a lot more from AI and it doesn't feel as natural. It's funny. We had a newsletter go out this morning that I personally write because I'm a crazy person and I like to have my hands on our newsletter. And I got a response from someone who said, this was great. It sounded really natural. And I love that, right? I mean, we're seeing so much from AI that we can tell, and you can tell as a recruiter.
Yeah.
So
right.
with
and
our
I would
last,
say, and I don't want to, miscommunicate and say don't use AI. Certainly, I use it as well, and I use it for I'll get the response back that I with my prompt. I'll take that, but then I need to add the 30% of the final version needs to come from me personally. So I'm not saying ignore AI. It is a great tool for sure, but don't rely solely on that. You've got to massage it. You've got to personalize it to your point, Debra.
Absolutely. We've got, for anyone who goes to our YouTube channel, we've got a couple of videos on how to use AI for your job search to help propel the job search in ways that are not writing your resume. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. We definitely need to be using AI in ways that are helpful and not using it in ways that are kind of getting us in the pile of applicants that didn't put their effort in, right? And on that topic, with our last couple of minutes, one of the questions I know everyone wants to hear from you is, what are some of the things that get even senior leaders kicked off the shortlist? Maybe they don't realize they're doing things like that can cost opportunities.
Yeah, again, it kind of comes back to communication and just knowing your audience. I've been married to a marriage and family therapist for 33 years, and so communication is very, very big in my life, as I always talk about. But it's equally important in your professional life as well, right? So you got to make sure that you are aligning yourself with the jobs that you're applying to or seeking or pursuing, first of all. Secondly, you don't want to be a pest, right? If you, for example, if you're engaged with a search firm like mine and I'm actually working with you on a specific position, it's fine to check in once a week. I should be giving you feedback once a week anyway. Once a week is fine. But if you're just on my radar screen, calling me once a week is a very fast way to get off of my short list, right? I'm gonna think, well, this person's kind of a pest or they're very desperate, so that's one thing is kind of over communicating if you're not in an active search mode right now. The other thing to do is that, you got to make sure that you're not overselling yourself. That is part of the issue with AI as well. If you ask AI to, write me a resume as a VP of sales, in Louisiana within the oil and gas industry, it's going to pull up very common language that may not be you. And it also may not reflect your skill set, right? So whether you're using AI or just yourself, you don't want to embellish things, right? There was, back in the Great Recession of 07, 08, 09, people were actually putting resumes together and they would include every keyword under the sun on the resume, but it would be in white font, meaning you don't actually see it, but the applicant tracking system the company's using will actually flag it. It'll come up as a potential candidate because that keyword is in there. But then once you get into the interview process, it's going to be very clear very quickly that you do not have that skill set. So don't make that same mistake. That's the quickest way to get kicked out of any kind of a search process as well. But again, just make sure you're doing your research, stay up to date, find ways to engage with that client that you're in or that company that you're interviewing with. Send them articles, events that you're attending, networking events or conferences. Find ways to add value and demonstrate how you being part of their team is really going to help them accelerate their growth and solve their problems.
I love that. So you're saying you can engage with the interviewers in the company outside of the actual interview and add some value as the process goes on, which we know sometimes the interview process can go on months. So you can stay in front and add value throughout.
Definitely. Yeah. Through LinkedIn is a great way to do that as well. I had a prospect call with an international company in Spain today. And, afterwards I connected with the individuals, the hiring manager, through LinkedIn, had a short conversation follow up. And so it's not being, it's not being a pest. It's not over communicating. It's not being, too aggressive, but it's just engaging and showing people kind of what you're all about as well. If I happen to see something that's coming up as far as an event, or if I find some great content, an article written by Forbes or whatever, I'm going to share that with my clients and my candidates as well, just to keep that engagement going. So any job seeker can do exactly the same thing. And it's important to kind of stay up to date on what's happening, what the trends are in that particular sector also.
Yes, I love that. That's such a good point. This such gold, and I know we had tons of questions we won't have time to get to. But tell me, are there any last minute thoughts for candidates in this market right now? Anything you'd like to share with the audience as we wrap up?
I'd say, first of all, anybody that has questions that we didn't get to, because I know we had a kind of short amount of time, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm very involved and very engaged with LinkedIn, so I'm happy to answer your questions. Don't everybody email me the same second, because I'll be bombarded. But over the next couple of days, please feel free to reach out. But I would just say, it's like I said, it's a very fluid, it's a somewhat of an uneven market out there. So be sure that the jobs that you are pursuing, make sense. They're aligned with what you're doing. I would say also, as a caveat, job descriptions these days are not written very well. So if you see a job description and you feel like you have, my rule of thumb is 75 to 80% of the skill set, then go ahead and apply. Right.
Love that.
And there's a difference. Men tend to apply to a job even if they have only 40% of the experience, and women tend to only do it if they have 80 or 90%. So someplace in the middle of those two numbers is the appropriate amount.
I love that.
Yeah,
so important.
Yeah, so make sure that you're aligned with the jobs out there. And I have this. The last thing I would say is that I have this exercise I take folks through, called your get tos and you have tos. Meaning, what are the things in your job, either currently or maybe your last job if you're in transition? What are the things that you get to do, that you like to do, that really you gravitate towards, that gets you up in the morning, that you're excited to be doing, right? Make a list of all the get tos. Then on the other side, the have tos. What are the things that you have to do? We all have tos.
Love that.
Yeah, Debra, you and I own our businesses. We run our companies, and we still have things that we have to do that we don't really, love.
Yep.
Then use that as your guidepost when you're applying to jobs or networking or trying to get into a certain company. Make sure that you're going to maximize the get tos and minimize the have tos, and that'll inform the questions that you ask during the interview as well. So it's a little exercise that I take folks through. I got that I'm a big movie fan, as you can see with the stuff behind me on the wall. But that came from a line in the great movie Parenthood with Steve Martin. So get tos and have tos.
I love the get tos and have tos, and I'm going to use that with our clients as well. That's gold.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know we went a few minutes over, but I could talk to you all day because I know you have such great insight for job seekers, and I really appreciate you taking this time to share it with us. And everyone, reach out to Ken if you're an employer looking to hire in any of the areas that he covers, mid-market, PE, private-owned companies. Make sure to reach out. Ken is one of those people that just doing business the right way. I love your approach, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a good day.
Thank you.